See you.
And I want to welcome you on behalf of the iHotel History Committee. And so today we're going to talk to you a little bit about how St. Mary's rescued the iHotel.
No. Good.
So tell me, Father Dan, how did you become Cantonese?
By default. I was asked to come and help in 1983 for 6 months and stayed almost 24 years. So, I love the community. Challenging, but I love it.
And we love that you're here, Father.
Thank you.
So, what happened that you ended up having to look for a new site for St. Mary's?
Well, the thing that really began seriously thinking about building a new St. Mary's was the earthquake in 1989. After the Loma Prieta earthquake, the city changed its building code, so unreinforced masonry buildings had to be retrofitted, which probably encompasses 99% of the buildings in Chinatown. So looking at what we were going to do in retrofitting and the cost of it and the loss of space, we came to the conclusion that it's probably not financially sound to retrofit an old building. So I was looking around for an alternative site, and I used to have breakfast with Gordon Lau. You know, Gordon, graduate of St. Mary's and been a member of the Board of Supervisors and a lawyer here in Chinatown. And we would have breakfast at the Holiday Inn, and we look out the window. And he was the one that really began to encourage me to look at the possibility of building a new St. Mary's. There's a piece of property on Washington Street next to there's a restaurant there next to Namyun, I believe, the restaurant there,
right,
that belonged to us at one time, but it was sold many years ago. And so that was too small to look at that. And then we we had seen for years and years this vacant lot. So that got me going into looking into investigating whether the owner of the land would be interested in selling it. And of course, this was back in 1989, and I did not know at that time a lot of the history behind the iHotel site. So I quickly learned the history of it and realized that anyone who was going to develop the iHotel site, that senior housing had to be a component of it.
Didn't it worry you that there was such a history to it?
It didn't, no, I think that, no, it didn't worry me at all about the history to it. I think the way I was looking at it and the way I think the church ultimately looked at it was that here we are a nonprofit institution, a religious-based institution with no political agendas, that coming in and purchasing the land and working with the community, we accomplished two things. One, brought, I think, about a sense of healing, because there were so many people who were affected by what happened in 1976 in August. And the second thing is to undo an injustice that was done back in those days and to replace the housing. So I think we were kind of excited about working with the community in developing this property for housing and for a new school.
That's wonderful that you did come around to do this, because obviously the need was there. How did you go about finding the owners? My understanding is that they were not easy to deal with, and my understanding also is there's a lot of people involved in trying to get the site for St. Mary's.
Well, when I found out more about the property, and I had heard about 4C's Investment Corporation, and then I found out that it was changed from 4C's to Pag Magna, and I knew one of the lawyers who was part of the 4C's, Norman Liu. So Norman Liu introduced me one day to Po Mahaguna. We had lunch actually at the Celadon restaurant, which is no longer, and then afterwards we walked over to school and showed him around and showed him the kindergarten class and that. And afterwards, I don't know if it was Norman or someone turned to me that said, "You have no shame that you showed him these little kids. How could he refuse you?" So he went back to talk to his father about it. And then three of us, Ralph Marchese, myself, and Jerry Lee, went to Bangkok to meet the father and talk to him about knowing the history and asked him, would he be willing to sell to the church the property at a discount? And he said yes. So ultimately he said yes. He didn't say it at that meeting, but ultimately then got back to us, and then we started negotiating, working out the deals, because as we all know that this piece of property was also connected to the Colombo building.
Yes.
Because he couldn't sell the Colombo building until there was a resolution of this piece of property.
I see. So how did you convince the Archdiocese?
Well, when we looked into this and found out that there was the possibility of developing with the community this property, then a group of us went to the Archdiocese, Johnny Hall Chin and Gordon Lau and Norman Liu and Jerry Lee and Monsignor McElroy, who was vicar for administration at that time, and Bruce Agnew, who was the CFO of the Archdiocese. We met with them, and they wanted us to continue to explore it. And then eventually we went to Archbishop Quinn and met with the College of Consultors. And then the Archdiocese, some people don't quite understand, the Archdiocese has its own form of government. And so there are certain things that you have to do in order to get final permission. And one of them was to go to the College of Consultors, which is made up of a group of priests. And we went and made a presentation to them. Then they advised the Archbishop, at that time was Archbishop Quinn, who said, fine, if you can do it, go with it. So the condition was that we had to put up our money, the sale of the property at 902 Stockton Street. So the sale of that property went immediately into an account, and we used the money from that to get the project going. Actually, if I remember correctly, St. Mary's, because the CCDC and the I-Hotel Committee did not have any cash, that the beginning of it, we put up the money for it so we can get the project off the ground.
And we thank you for it. Well, obviously, we've already started. And my understanding is also that because this was an air rights deal, it was rather complicated. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the garage being built and then the pad being shared?
When I, being naive in the area of real estate development, I was kind of simplistic. I had seen the original drawings for this property that was done by Lung Chan and Eva Chan. And I just thought, well, the property's already designed. You had the housing, I think it was like 8 floors, and then you had 50 or 60,000 square feet of commercial space with a parking garage underneath. Why not just come in and just redesign the commercial space into a school? Well, it wasn't quite that simple, as we found out. There had been a requirement in the original EIR, I believe, for parking spaces. And then we realized that in terms of even programs for ourselves, one of the biggest difficulties we have being in the heart of Chinatown is there's no parking. So we convinced the diocese that it would be a good thing to build a parking garage. And so that became the foundation for the I-Hotel housing tower and the foundation for St. Mary's. And it was very complicated because ownership rights, so the decision was to divide it into 3 air right parcels. The Archdiocese owns the 3 floors, 3.5 floors, whatever it is, of the parking garage. The Ishi, is it? International Hotel Senior Housing Incorporated, they own the air rights for the housing tower. And then St. Mary's, even though it was part of the church, we still had to pay for it. We paid $640,000, whatever, for our air rights parcel. So there are 3 ownership parcels. So it was complicated, because once you do that, then you have to bring in expert lawyers on how to divide it all up and all these things.
It's an amazing and wonderful jigsaw puzzle. My understanding also of the way that this is designed is hopefully someday there's going to be a connection between the St. Mary's School building and the senior housing building as well. So I remember there's on the third floor a set of double doors that leads to nowhere right now.
Right, and that would be connecting to the level. When the kids come into school, they come up one level, so it's actually our second floor. So there is a plaza or a play yard, whatever you want to call it. And we had talked before, when we were designing all of this, about doing intergenerational things with the seniors in the housing tower with the children. And at times when we're not there, that it could be used by residents.
That's a wonderful concept, and I hope we can get to see this happening pretty soon.
Yes.
I'd like to go back a little bit,
Sure.
talk about John Hall Chin's contribution to all of this, because unfortunately he's not here anymore, but I remember attending a few meetings where he was so enthusiastic and really got a lot of people going to try and help do the fundraising for St. Mary's.
John Hall Chin was a graduate of St. Mary's who stayed on at St. Mary's. He came when he was like 14 or 15 years old, and the sisters taught him English. And then he started working in the language school with Dr. Chu Chu Shong, and eventually took over as principal of the language school. So he was principal of the language school for maybe like 45 years. When we began to talk about this project with the diocese, there was some hesitancy financially on the part of the diocese on the, number one, the ability of St. Mary's to raise money, and therefore they were a little cautious about it. So what they did at that time was allow us to establish a nonprofit foundation called the John Hall Chin Chinese Building Foundation. And the purpose of that foundation was to do the fundraising, build the building, and then turn it over to the Archdiocese. At the beginning, when I started talking to John, I went to Poyuk and Chinese Language School Board meetings. In fact, John went with me the first time we met with the iHotel Advisory Citizens Advisory Committee at Chinese Hospital. It's a long time. It's got to be like 1992 or 93. I forget the exact. And John went with me because he was enthused about doing this. In fact, the day that, unfortunately, that he died, we had just been at a meeting about the project, and he was really enthused about it. Was honored the fact that we were establishing this foundation, but he didn't live to see the foundation actually get in existence. It was after he had died. But then things changed with the Archdiocese, and they decided that they would purchase the land, which was good for us because then we could use the money from the sale of the 902 Stockton Street property towards construction.
This is really a unique partnership of many, many aspects of our community, and we thought that it was just remarkable that you were able to get this done. I mean, it's nothing that anybody has ever done before, and I know it's a difficult situation for St. Mary's. It's not a large parish, is it?
No, I mean, even St. Mary's Chinese Schools, even though we are Catholic schools, only 10% of our kids are Catholic, because our mission has always been one of evangelization, to be in the presence in the community, to witness to our faith in that. And so in the school, even though they take religion classes, very few of our kids are Catholic. So that's unique. And therefore, the parish community of Holy Family, which is part of St. Mary's Chinese Mission, Holy Family is relatively small, made up of a number of people who had graduated from the school and had been baptized by the Paulist. And then the Chinese Mass that we have has a lot of seniors, a lot of elderly people who live within Chinatown. in that. So we're small. So that was a concern the diocese had, being only maybe 200, 250 parishioners. How are we going to take upon ourselves to raise, at the time, and never believe architects. I don't care who the architects are, never believe them. At the time said it would be, maybe 6 million, so we set our capital campaign at 7 million. And I had been told all along by experts, Father, we're talking about 12, 15 million.
So we understood it to be 15 million. It's a huge task. And we have a very small parish at Holy Family.
Right.
John wasn't around anymore. So who took on this gargantuan task of trying to raise the funds?
Well, when we finally got the green light from Archbishop Quinn, and a guaranteed from my superiors and the Archbishop that they would not transfer me until the building is completed, I went to Dr. Colin Kwok. Dr. Kwok is a well-known cardiologist here in Chinatown. Dr. Kwok is a graduate of St. Mary's. His 5 kids went to St. Mary's. His grandkids go to St. Mary's. Dr. Kwok, being a very devout man of faith and being Catholic, when I asked him would he take on the responsibility of being the general chair of the campaign, he hesitated, but then I reminded him that God was calling, and so he responded, and he has been head of the campaign ever since. And under his leadership, up until the present time, we have raised over 14 million, though we know we have a long ways to go.
So what's the next step to raise the rest of the money?
Well, we started the second phase of the campaign. One of the other challenges that we had within the Archdiocese, Archbishop Quinn retired, Archbishop Leveda came in, so we had to go make sure that he was on board with the project, and he'd come several times, in fact, did the blessing of the ground, and he was on board, and then he leaves and goes to Rome, and a new Archbishop comes in, Archbishop George Niederauer, and last October we invited him to come and spend a day or an afternoon in Chinatown, and we visited, he visited the school, saw where we were, and realized, we got to get out of there. It's not, it's been functional, but beyond that, it is not the best place to be. And so we took a tour of Chinatown with Chinese Hospital, had a complete tour. He was impressed that there are a number of St. Mary's graduates who are in position of administration at Chinese Hospital, including doctors and pharmacists. And then we visited the Willie Woo Woo Wong Playground, which is named after our graduate, pointed out Gordon Lauk Elementary School, named after one of our graduates, and then came here and then had a wonderful visit. It was actually my first time in the housing tower, and was just amazed by the beauty of it. It was just, it helped him understand the importance of St. Mary's to the community. And we had dinner with him afterwards. And about a month later, he sent me a letter saying that he consulted with his cabinet, which were the other bishops, and the finance council and they were totally behind the project and wanted us to succeed. And at that time, he made a promise of a gift of $2 million. It's a challenge grant. For every $3 we raise, he will give us $1. So if we raise $6 million, he will give us $2 million, but we know we have to raise more than $6 million. And then right before Christmas, we received another $500,000 gift from the Gellert Foundation. And then most recently, May and Sinclair Louis just gave us $500,000 as a challenge grant. So we are moving forward quickly. The Chinese community, by and large, has been extremely, extremely generous. Probably in many ways, we have raised more money out of the Chinese community outside of Chinese Hospital than any other organization. And we are so grateful because many of those donors are not Catholic, but they have been influenced by St. Mary's, and they want to see St. Mary's continue. And so they have been very generous. And so our next phase continue to work within the Chinese community, but we need to go to the wider community, to other foundations and donors.
Yes, and the target now is?
Well, it's a good question, because as we all know, costs have escalated in the last 5 or 6 years, and we figured that we have to raise at least another, with the $3 million gift that we got since December, probably another $12 million.
Wow.
But we're working on it. I mean, we have plans to, as I say, the diocese has been very cooperative in this and have bent their rules to accommodate us. So we're working very diligently to figure out a way to get a construction loan and continue to fundraising, because any nonprofit that exists today, development and fundraising is a way of life. It's not a one-shot thing anymore. You are constantly raising money. I mean, you can look at Unlock, Self-Help for the Elderly as two good examples. Fundraising is constantly out there.
And that's been such a rude awakening in many ways, because for so long St. Mary's didn't need to do this heavy-duty kind of fundraising, and because of the earthquake, this need just suddenly appeared, and I guess we entered the new century.
Right, you're absolutely correct. I mean, we had been in existence for 75 years or more up on Stockton Street and provided programs all these years where we didn't do a lot of major fundraising. When I first came, we did minor stuff, like $400,000 or $500,000, because we had to retrofit. Back then, it was to retrofit the parapets.
Yes.
And then we did some interior work in the school. So that in itself I thought was difficult. But to dream that a new school is going to be $28 million the time you get finished with this kind of mind-boggling. But a lot of that has to do where we're building, because this landfill has a lot to do with the city, San Francisco. They're not always that friendly towards development and improvement, unless you're a big corporation with millions and millions of dollars in that. So, and to build in Chinatown, where there is no space to go. I mean, look at across the street, on the Tong building, took almost as long as it took to get the foundation and that built, because of various things. It's been a challenge.
I know, and I thank you for taking on that challenge. At the end of the day, when it is completed, how many students will be served?
Well, one of the things that we had been asked to do by the Archdiocese, when the school was designed, we had hired an outside architectural firm, HOK was it? Anyway, to do programming for us. And based upon that, our classrooms are unusually large. They may be like 1,100 to 1,200 square feet. And the reason was so that we can also offer adult education, programs, whether it be, the language school is moving more and more into Mandarin and teaching Mandarin or offering other kinds of programs. And so that was one of the reasons why we built such large classrooms. The diocese asked us to go back and relook at that to see if we should or could reduce the size of the building. We have done that, and our conclusion is no. It could be done, but we would lose so much, and the cost effectiveness probably is not going to be that significant. So the idea is to build these classrooms so that we can expand. One in the heydays, we had 40 kids in a classroom. Gone are those days. I think the diocese has a limit max of 35 students. Probably 30, 32 would be the max. So we would be able to increase our enrollment in the day school and language school.
That's great. Well, you're mentioning adult classes as well. I guess that's also on the horizon.
Well, the idea was years ago to expand our program and to use the building to the maximum. you know, to use the classrooms at nighttime, to use the gymnasium / auditorium / cafeteria for various functions for the community. There's the only large meeting place in Chinatown is really Old St. Mary's Auditorium. Self-Help for the Elderly uses that quite frequently, and other organizations. So this would be the first rather large size space. And in the building was to be a chapel. We're rethinking of that, maybe putting in preschool, because there's a big need in Chinatown for a preschool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because they keep losing their spaces in Chinatown.
Well, the spaces are valuable. That's very true. And I remember at one point we were talking about the possibility of incorporating the Fong building, but that was way long time ago, I guess.
Right. Boy, you have a good memory.
I was there.
Back when we were looking at the property, the I Hotel property, there was a suggestion made by someone about the Fong building, and I knew Paul Fong because he's in the same law office with Norman Liu. So we met with them, and the idea was the Poyok Educational Foundation, which is the foundation that financially supports the language school, would consider purchasing it and building, adding on to it, maybe making that the area where the gym, so that we'd have more space in the school, and housing on top. But that didn't pan out. And then when Archbishop Niederauer was here, the day we were doing the blessing of the ground here, he turned to me and he says, well, why aren't we purchasing that other piece of land, namely the Fantech property, which is now Community College has? Well, we actually looked into that too. We tried to work with Fantech to think, well, maybe expand the garage all the way to Washington Street, or let them build commercial space and expand our playground on top and that. But they weren't interested in, well, first of all, they wanted a lot of money. And secondly, the gentleman we spoke with felt that, I guess there were 6 families involved in Fantech, and they were not all speaking to one another, as it were.
Not a good situation to be in. Wow. Well, have you had a chance to think about what's going to happen with the proposal of City College putting a campus next door?
I knew you were going to ask that question.
Just curious.
Well, actually, I saw the original proposal, and that was Fong Building and Lot 5 and the Colombo Building, which seemed to be pleasing to a lot of people. I was pleasing to, at least to me, and I think the teachers and that, because they're going to build an auditorium behind us, which could be used for various things. So I was a little surprised when that didn't pan out, and I was very surprised. I had heard the rumors that they were going to build next to us, and then when I finally found out, I mean, I saw the design of the building and that. I think that the concept of making this area a center for education for the community is extremely important, because as we know in Chinese culture, education is number one. Parents will save and scrape, and send their kids to the best schools to make sure they get the best education so that they can be successful in life. So the concept is excellent. I have reservations about the size of the building and what effect St. Mary's being in between 2 towers. And one of my concerns has been, which I wrote in a letter to them, was actually 2 concerns. One was the sun, what effect, and the other thing, will it create a wind tunnel?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because on Stockton Street, it was amazing how even with Mandarin Tower on one side, that it was always windy. And so I don't know what effect the 2 would have, because I'm sure that the community college is going to be taller than this building. I think so. I think it's like 17 stories. Yeah. But I think the idea of having making this area central for education is very important.
I agree.
But, you know, we just have to look. Interesting enough, as St. Mary's has been for some time in communication with community college. We actually had a meeting several months ago at Ralph Marchese's office, in which Aaron Peskin was there, and Chancellor Day, Jim Bloomquist, an engineer that had designed this property, the foundation for the I Hotel site, and some other people to talk about how can St. Mary's be helpful to them and how can they be helpful to us. And one of the ideas was maybe have them build on top of St. Mary's.
Interesting.
But it can't be done. The foundation wasn't designed to hold that kind of weight. So then other things came up about, you know, how can we try to mitigate some of the concerns that the community has. So we have tried to work with them and had we still do have a good working relationship with them. But I know the community as a whole, there are concerns.
Right, I really don't know that anybody objects to the concept of having them come here. It's just the design process hasn't been optimal.
Right.
And I really think that's the real concern more than anything else.
And I guess it's not a minor thing, but when I saw the design, because I went to a public meeting and that, I was a little taken back by a glass building.
Yes.
Because I was thinking back on the number of years that we had to deal with the city in designing these two buildings, the restrictions that they made.
Yes.
Couldn't be Chinatown, so you couldn't use red brick. Had to be Jackson Square, and that's why the bricks are the color that they are, because the city placed all these restrictions on us. And then all of a sudden, you wake up some morning and you have a glass building. And the concern, of course, with the glass building is, you know, what happens if
there's an earthquake?
Or an earthquake, or the example the other day, some building here in the city, because the winds were so strong, blew out the window.
That's right.
You know.
That's kind of
So
scary.
that would be kind of scary, and especially if you have children outside or whatever.
And hopefully they will take these things into consideration on the
Oh, I
next
think they
design.
are. I think they are. I think that they're looking into all of this. And I know the EIR is completed. I know parking was another issue.
Right.
But they were talking about leasing spaces under this building, so I don't know. But I don't own the property. I don't own the garage. The Archdiocese does.
Right, right. Can we go back a little bit
Sure.
and talk about the process of choosing to build the senior housing? How did you decide who was going to be your partner, joint venture partner in this thing? What was the decision-making process?
When we began to think about the housing portion, and we had talked to the advisory committee on more than one occasion about it, my first instinct was to go with Mercy Charities, because Mercy Charities is the housing arm of the church that's built a lot of low-income housing around the city. And so I met with Jane Graff, and Jane Graff was head of Mercy Housing. I think she still is head of Mercy Housing. Anyway, we talked about it, and we showed her what the plans, what needed to be done in that. And she came up with the idea of maybe going for a HUD grant, that this would be helpful. And so we discussed that, and then I was asked, the suggestion was made to meet with Gordon Chin at CCDC, and I met with Gordon and Susie Wong, actually, and we discussed it. And at that time, both of them agreed that maybe let the church do it because of the reputation of Mercy Housing and that. And then we met a second time, and that was the conclusion. And then the actual ultimate decision was up to the iHotel Citizen Advisory Committee. And they met at Chinese Hospital, I believe, and the decision was made by them. And once that was done, then we just entered into a partnership collaboration with the iHotel, with the CCDC, the iHotel Advisory Committee, Filipino community, you name it, we met.
Well, we're just grateful that we were able to get this place built. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to this?
No, I just to say that you had mentioned way back, about did I ever envision myself to be a real estate developer? No. When we were trained to be priests, we were trained to do religious things and how to preach and how to teach and how to administer the sacraments. We didn't get courses in human resources, finances, real estate development. So it's been a learning experience for me. And not being involved in the political scene, and no matter what you do here in Chinatown, politics is always going to be part of it, and that was a learning experience. Met a lot of interesting people. Met a lot of interesting people, creating some good friendships, and maybe not so good friendships, but. But it's been a big challenge. We keep telling people when they say, when's St. Mary going to start? When's St. Mary? Well, we're going to say it soon. And I keep saying that. But when you look at it, what we started out to do, 2/3 of it is completed. It's only the school portion that's left. And unfortunately, costs have gone up, and we know that, and we are working on that so that hopefully in 2008 we will get things moving.
And if there's anything we can do as an organization to help that along,
oh, that's very
please call on
kind.
our
Did you
help.
bring the checkbook with you? No, I understand that, and I appreciate that because we're going to be neighbors for many, 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 many decades to come, and
hopefully sooner than later.
And the kids, I think, will, in terms of intergenerational activities, because the kids go over to Lady Shaw as it is now. The Chinese New Year's, Christmas, Easter, the 8th graders go over and help serve meals because it's important for kids to be exposed to their elders.
That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, good thing.
I'd like to open up to questions from the rest of the committee.
Pretty much covered.
Was it a difficult task convincing the Mahaguna family to sell?
Well, we had a number of meetings in my old residence at 902 Stockton Street around the dining room table with people from the mayor's office and CCDC, and that there was obviously a lot of strong feelings towards the Mahaguna family. But I think because we were neutral in the sense that we were a church, a religious group that was trying to do something good for the community, somehow I think that in their eyes they saw that we were solving their problem for them because they could not do anything with this property until there was an agreement on housing. So once that was in agreement, and once we went into escrow to purchase the land, the housing didn't have to be built. The original plan was the housing had to be built before they could get rid of the Colombo building. But once that, once the agreement was that the Archdiocese, in the memorandum of understanding with the housing group, that the housing would be built, then they were free to sell that other piece of property, the Colombo building. But they had ties to the church. I did not realize that at the time. Mr. Mahaguna's wife was Catholic. His daughter, Dang, was married at Old St. Mary's. So there was some kind of connection there. But it was obvious that there were a lot of strong feelings. That's why I say that I'm glad that the church had some role in trying to bring about some kind of healing. You have to remember the past, in order to move to the future. But if you hold on to the negative things of the past. You never move to the future. And so remembering the past is good, but look at the future.
Well, thank you so much for coming today, Father, and
My pleasure.
sharing your thoughts with us. And hopefully we can get this school built soon.
We'll get it done. We get it. Dr. Bach thinks I'm sometimes too optimistic, but you have to be optimistic, even in the midst of challenges. I mean, it's been a long road, it's been a difficult road, but in the end, look, we've accomplished 2/3.
It's terrific.
Let's do the last third.
Thank you.
Okay? Good. Okay, now you're gonna put that in a time capsule and send it into outer space?
Well, they're hopefully going to get an exhibit together.
Oh, good.
To talk about the history of building and the joint
Good.
venture. And all.
Chinese. His name is Zheng. Chinese name is Zheng. You know, remember Zhou Zheng from Celadon? Zhou Zheng knew him. They belonged to the same association or family group at one time. Because he had also, Zhou Zheng was instrumental in talking to him in that. But it was interesting. And then it was later that he agreed to do it, to sell it at a discount, and he had to work with all the lawyers.
That could kill the deal in and of itself.
I could name lawyers. Well, not even, it was just not just dealing with buying. And then once it was purchased, then we had all those discussions. Ownership, who's going to own this, and why can't we do this, why do this, that, and the other thing. And then we had Koblenz,
Yes.
Duffy, and Bass, real estate development lawyers who got involved. And then you had the lawsuits from the people up Telegraph Hill. And the Holiday Inn, I don't think, was too happy about the housing, but I mean, it was that far away. I mean, it's not that much taller than, so. Yeah. So, I mean, you had all those little, you know all of that.
Screaming in the yard would disturb it.
Yeah. Get used to it. That's precisely why I think when they designed this, all of the units are really facing towards the north, and some that way and that way, but none. Well, I guess there are a couple that face into the schoolyard. Not too many.
Mostly the hallways are on the south
Right,
side.
but people are in their units, and besides, elderly people like to watch children.
Mm-hmm.
Because up at Lady Shaw, they're all hanging out the window in the morning, watching the kids coming to school. Guadalupe.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Keeps you young.
Yeah, it does. Sometimes one gets tired, though.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anytime. Thank you.
So, can we get a copy of the tape to Father Daniel too?
Yeah,
sometime?
here's a copy. When the fathers have nothing else to do, and they can turn it on and